EHR Practice Management, Insurance Eligibility with Demographic Updates. In our standard insurance eligibility video, we discussed the verification of a patient's benefits. In this video, we're going to discuss an extension of that program where the program actually will detect demographic differences at the clearinghouse in comparison to the values within patient register. Now, as an extension to the program, the same logic applies as far as executing the program either through a scheduled process or ad hoc, so there are no additional requirements. However, in order to use the feature, there are some additional settings involved, such as at the user role level, there is a no access role that can be assigned to any individual within the practice who, as part of their workflow, will have the ability to update demographics when these differences are detected. In addition, there is a couple of properties, one that actually enables the update functionality, which will provide an icon at the eligibility details level that displays this comparison where the demographics differ, as well as a property that allows you to define specifically what fields of data you want to compare between patient register and the clearinghouse. Now, once that setup is defined and the benefits are captured, then the icon will be enabled when at least one or more mismatch fields is detected, and the updates that are displayed within the icon can be applied explicitly by any user who has this unique role defined to them. Now, this icon is available at multiple places throughout the system. For instance, at the schedule level, down at the patient info pane, you have the insurance eligibility icon itself, as well as within the insurance details, the icon is available. Under patient register through patient insurance, you will see the icon. And this is the case both here on EHR as well as on practice management. So for those of you who do use practice management, you can also access this demographic update feature through patient register and insurance and eligibility details on the billing side. And then also under tabular reports, there is a specific demographic mismatch list which contains a hyperlink which allows you to apply the same updates. And at a system level, there is tracking of all of the changes that are applied both under the audit trail as well as within the patient register history. So we're going to take a look at this inside the EHR. I've logged in here as my front office person, Gabby Dawson, and we've opened up our schedule page where we're going to look at a couple of examples. First of all, we're going to look here at a simple example where the subscriber is the patient, Antonio Dawson. So I've selected him on the schedule. As covered in our standard eligibility video, you'll notice I have my schedule or status flags enabled. That capital V indicates that my eligibility has been verified. Therefore, down here in our lower left where we have our patient information, the easiest way to review the demographics, I can go directly to my eligibility details by clicking this icon. And we see here for Antonio Dawson that my demographic update icon up here in the upper right is enabled. That means that at least one field has been mismatched. Now, I'm not going to discuss the benefits section down here because that is what we do cover in the other video. But we're going to look at the demographic fields now that are compared and that are mismatched. So I'm going to click that icon. So as we open up our demographic comparison table here, we'll notice that there is a patient tab and a subscriber tab. And within our tab, we have this first column, which is the field. And as mentioned back in our introduction, these are going to be the fields that you define within that property that you would like to be compared. Then the next column is your prognosis details, meaning what the value is within your patient register for that field for that patient. Then we have our eligibility details, which is the value that the eligibility program captured from the clearinghouse. And then we have the update prognosis column, where the checkbox is either enabled or disabled based on whether or not the value matches. For instance, here where we see the last name Dawson in patient register does not match the clearinghouse Dawson because it is misspelled. Notice within patient register it is Dawson, whereas on the clearinghouse they have Dowsson. So if you verify that the clearinghouse spelling is actually correct and you would like to update prognosis, you simply click that checkbox. and my update button has been enabled. So I can go down all of these fields and decide which ones need to be updated. Now notice the first name is also misspelled. We have Antonio with an O. His real name is Anthony at the clearinghouse. So if we want to update it to match, I'm going to go ahead and click that. Now the date of birth matches, so that checkbox is disabled. There's no reason to update it because it is not a mismatch. My gender is a match, so it is disabled. I do not have to update that, and so on. We notice that the address is also mismatched. Social Security number, we have it in prognosis. The clearinghouse did not have it, so it's not an option to update. Where the clearinghouse does not have information, but we do not have an option of updating it to make it blank. It assumes that we want to keep the data that we have. But when it is a mismatch, we have the option of updating it. So once I have identified the ones I would like to update, I simply click the update button. Now you do notice at the top there is an all box. That means if I want to update all of them at once instead of clicking individually, I do have that option. I also have the ignore option if I want to ignore those updates. So this would all fall upon your local workflow and how you go in and verify the information. So that's an example where only the patient details are captured, because notice our subscriber tab is disabled or grayed out, and that is because the relationship is self. Therefore, if we update it here at the patient level, it is also going to update at the subscriber level, so there's no reason to update it again. I'm just going to go ahead and update that so we can look at the history and the audit trail in a moment. It does give me a confirmation that I've updated my demographics. So I'm just going to close that out in Antonio. Now we're going to go down here and look at our next example of Allison vocality. Now, since we just looked through the quick icon for Antonio, I'm going to look at the insurance details level here for Allison, just so you see that that icon exists in other locations. So I'm going to open up Allison's insurance screen, and we see the same icon up here next to the details. And the same rules apply. If there were no mismatches, the icon would be disabled. And notice in the case of Allison, the subscriber tab is enabled this time. And that is because if we look down the page here, on the relationship, it is spouse. So unlike with Antonio, where we were only dealing with his demographics, with Allison's case, we have both demographics for herself as well as for the subscriber. Now, the details for herself is no different than what we just covered with Antonio. For instance, if we look here, we see her name is different. Apparently, maybe she got married and her insurance is now under a hyphenated last name. Her first name actually is misspelled because there's 2 L's instead of 1. So we certainly have the same rules here where we can select to update her name if we would like. But what we're going to concentrate on in this example is the subscriber. If we look on the subscriber tab, for instance, we notice in the prognosis details column it's totally blank because we showed under patient insurance the relationship as self. However, when we scraped eligibility benefits, it shows the details as being related to the spouse. So on our subscriber tab, the details are showing David Smith, her husband. Now if we look in the update column, the update options are already pre-selected for us, and if we notice the first 3 fields there, the first and last name and date of birth, they're actually disabled. We cannot deselect those. However, the Social Security number is enabled. The reason for this is subscriber requires name and date of birth. Those are compulsory to be updated. So if we are going to update our subscriber details, we will have to take the clearinghouse update since we don't have those fields already to compare. So in order to apply the update in the case of the subscriber, it is linked to the relationship field. So back here on the patient tab, on the relationship line, our update prognosis flag is enabled, and because under the subscriber tab those options are already pre-selected, by virtue of us selecting the relationship to be updated, when we click the update button down here at the bottom, in turn, it will also update the subscriber's first, last name, as well as date of birth. And then if we have gone ahead and selected the Social Security number, it will also update that on the subscriber details. And if these other fields were here, such as the spouse's gender, address, and so on, the same would apply as with the Social Security number. So only the name and date of birth are compulsory, meaning they will automatically update, therefore they will be pre-selected and disabled. And in order to apply the update, we will do that through the relationship option on our patient tab. In both of those examples, we just updated the details. So we have a couple of ways of looking at the audit trail or the history changes that we made. So first of all, since we still have Allison highlighted here, I'm going to go into her patient register. And so now that we've updated her name with the correct spelling, we're going to locate her under that correct spelling. And if we click the history button down here, we see the changes that we made. For example, we see here modified by Gabby Dawson, date and timestamp, and the first thing you'll notice, it says updated through eligibility. And that is how we know that it was the demographic updates feature within the eligibility program. And as with all of our history tracking, it shows both the original value as old as well as the new value. So we see here where we updated it from the original value of vocality to the new value of vocality-Smith. And from the old spelling of Allison with one L to the new spelling of two L's, we updated the relationship from self to spouse, and then the subscriber information and so on. If you don't want it at the granular level, such as this, which is individually by patient, you can also get it in report format at a system and date level, more operationally. So if we go under Report Audit Trail, for example, since this has to do with the patient insurance, if we go to our menu option and choose Patient Insurance, and we'll just go ahead and put in our date. And we also see it up here that it was updated through eligibility. And again, it shows the old versus the new data. Now, I mentioned that there's also the opportunity of the tabular report showing this data. So if you don't want to work it at the schedule level, depending on what your workflow is, some folks like to work from a report. We have the different eligibility reports, and we looked at the first two in our standard eligibility video. Specifically for the demographic mismatches, we're going to look at the third report here. And again, we'll just go ahead and leave it for this entire month. You'll notice in the far two columns, we have eligibility details as well as demo updates. These hyperlinks represent the details that we saw under the buttons at the schedule level. For example, here for Allison Vocality, if we click the hyperlink in the column Eligibility Demo Updates, we see the exact same screen that we saw from the schedule with the patient tab as well as the subscriber tab and the column of checkboxes where we can select the specific fields of data we want to update as well as the update button at the bottom. So in review of the demographic updates feature with the insurance eligibility, it is an extension of the standard eligibility program which must already be enabled. And this is covered, of course, in detail in the standard insurance eligibility video. Now, to use this extended feature, there are some additional settings and configuration required as well as a specific user role to apply the updates, which are covered in a separate video. We discussed that the icon is enabled when one or more data mismatch is found. The comparison is available at a schedule level, at the patient register and/or insurance level, as well as through a hyperlink under the tabular report eligibility mismatch. Now, the updates, though identified by the system, must be explicitly applied by a user based on local workflow. The results are tracked both individually at the patient register history level as well as systematically under the audit trail.